Well, first on my left, my partner in crime here, award-winning director, Mr. Paul Rachman, often imitated but never duplicated. And on my other side, an invaluable man, my man, your man, Tony Mann. And the next two of these guys, I mean, I could talk for a while about who they are, but in the matter of the questions, I think they'll reveal themselves. But first, to my far left, some people know her as Miss Gloria R. Jones. I prefer the Gloria Jones visiting us here. Let's hear it for Gloria Jones, visiting between Los Angeles and Sierra Leone. Very impressive. And one of the songwriters of so many great American classics, like Be a Pepper, and Aren't You Hungry for Burger King Now?
Gillette, the best
and my favorite, Gillette, A Best a Man Could Get, which, I want to be serious, that's like an 80s prog rock song. Like, Yes with Trevor Rabin could have done that with different lyrics. That was a dope song, yeah. So, I just wanted to kind of say that, so afterwards, we're going to be doing a book signing, and on top of the usual, get the authors to sign your Lost Rockers, you have this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with two really amazing musicians to join in that. And we'll also have copies of some of my other books here. I think this is only the second time that Paul Rachman and I have both signed American Hardcore, so if you want that. And speaking of the word lost, we'll be having my lost classic, American Hair Metal, that is available and I'll be pushing. In fact, Paul could verify this. When we were working on the American Hardcore film, and the very end of it, like that film was coming out, and the next year was American Hair Metal, and Paul's editing this really like seminal Black Flag, Bad Brains, SSD, Minor Threat footage. And I'm cranking like Warrant and Poison and Vinnie Vincent and Nitro. I guess you gotta see it to believe it. Just one of those little aside stories. So, oh, and then afterwards, like way later, we're going drinking at Dream Baby on Avenue B and 10th Street. So if I remember your face after a few drinks, that'll be awesome. Well, there should be.
There wasn't. But the thing with American Hair Metal that was so...
I remember when Steve was working on that, and as a filmmaker, music video director, I started my career with all this hardcore punk, and I ended up getting eventually signed to this company in LA to direct music videos and MTV's happening. And I remember going out there, and all the money and all the record companies was all in hair metal, and it wasn't really my favorite, but that's what I started having to direct, you know? And it was kind of like, until grunge happened, I was stuck in this like hair metal like songs that I was having a hard time connecting with and everything, but that's where
Can you talk about the pants that
you know, it was
pants?
I did that was
Brittany Fox. This is a good story.
It was just like, you know, you're directing these bands, and when I came in and was doing that, the genre was almost starting to die because Guns N' Roses had broken and everything's going hard rock, and then the Seattle stuff is happening, and that kind of saved me. Yeah, you know, these guys were doing videos and changing their clothes like every 3 takes, and then I'd say, well, I need to move around more, and the guitarist and Brittany Fox is like, well, I can't move around in these pants. You know? I mean, it was like, so when Steve started writing that book, and, you know, culturally, you know, there was a big phenomenon for a while there in LA, especially with the Sunset Strip and everything, but I always had a hard time connecting with that work. And of course, the production company I was at was like, you know, I want to do this Bad Brains video, and Caroline Records has no money, and I do that, but they're pushing me because, you know, the record label is going to spend $100 grand on Brittany Fox, you know? So it was a hard, like, I think it was about a year and a half, 2 years I was stuck in that, and then, you know, the grunge kind of saved me because that connected with punk, you know, and that got me out of that. But I remember when you started the book, it was like, oh man.
I lost a lot of friends over that.
Yeah.
One, so, like a lot of my really cool LA OC.
But it's a fun book. I mean, actually, you look at the book and it's like, it's great to look at. You kind of like, oh my God, I can't, that's what rock and roll was for a couple of years.
Yeah, so, well, I hope you enjoyed that aside. Maybe I enjoyed it more than you, but that's okay. So I'll start with Paul because we've been working on this from day one. We're seeing a palpable response to like what we started on. I mean, look at this crowd, the press response. It's clear that the subject, connects on a real level. So I guess what I want to ask you is, talk about the validation of this vision we had in the first place and why you think people relate so strongly to the Lost Rocker.
Well, I think early on, the connection was really that, this cast of characters, not everybody can be a big rock star. There's just not enough room for that. So I think everyday people or anybody with a dream or everybody trying to work at something and excel can, these people, these are incredibly talented, nice people, and they're so much closer to who you are. So I think there's, the idea when we were making the film was, okay, we can talk about this music, talk about these bands, talk about these characters, but where's the humanity? Because when you have all these people in a movie theater watching the same movie, you need to connect to the human element. And my thought was always like, well, what are the people in the audience thinking? What are they going to think when they're looking at this if they're not, let's say, into music? So, if somebody had a dream of being an architect, or somebody had a dream of being anything creative, or anything that they tried and maybe didn't give up or gave up, they can identify with that struggle and what it means. And that's kind of what we were looking for in terms of the humanity inside the film and in the stories in the book. The book has it too. And, the film's taken a long time to do. Some films take a long time. And, but we had a big screening. We screened it a few times for a few people. We had a big screening last year at the Film Society, and I think we both recognized that connected. Like people were like, I really understand what it feels like when these people were telling these stories. And I've never picked up an instrument in my life. So I think that's kind of the inner humanity of these stories, in a way, that connects the 8 stories in the film.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like this whole, what we're talking about too is this culture of the Lost Rocker, right? It's like, there's the Billboard charts and then there's like real artists, right? So it's like, what side are you on? Like I was talking before about being a journalist, and it's cool to get like a gold record on your wall or something, but there's a heavy price to pay for that. I mean, there's a lot of sucking up, and there's a lot of, so it's not like like when you're on the inside, it's not cool either. That's all I'm saying. So that's one thing that I think Paul and I felt very liberated with this whole project. Tony, you intimately know the book's characters, so, talk about all these musicians. They come from different sounds and styles. I mean, look at Gloria and Jake, right? But yet there's something in common, and what are you noticing?
Okay, well, what I think is that these people are like, they're craftspeople. You got the artists, and then you got like a star. And the star is the media makes and breaks, but the craftsperson keeps working, they do their work, and it's their lifestyle, and they put their heart in it. And if it becomes a hit, it's a hit, whatever, but still they go on, they're doing other things. Jake did so many things besides, he was in a band with Joan Rivers, he wrote a lot of hit jingles, he wrote Dazed and Confused, he's had multiple careers, he's worked on albums for Frank Sinatra, he's worked with Harry Belafonte, and a real wide range. So it's not just like a rock guy or a metal guy or one-dimensional. And Gloria, you have people like Tina Turner that sang, everybody knows is a star, and it's, great singer, charismatic, whatnot, but Gloria is someone who wrote, produced, acted. She was in the original Ellie cast of Hair. She's done so many things. I mean, she produced a hit for Gonzalez, they were going to go on tour with Bob Marley, they wouldn't go without her. You know, so you get people that are one-dimensional, they're a star, they're put there by somebody, like a Britney Spears or a band that's created, but you know, these people have a lot of integrity about what they do, and they put their heart in it, and I really think that makes a difference in an overall career where you really want to listen to all their body of work later, and it's wide-ranging and hard-hitting and has more soul. And all these people, you know, they're heart and soul. They're not phony. They're not posers. You know, so it's quite a difference between the star and the craft. And the thread they have in common, I think, is just the integrity and just want to express themselves and do their thing. And they're really uncompromising people. They really respect that.
Awesome. And kind of, Paul could kind of follow this up in a way that I was going to talk to you about as a visual person. You know, you kind of selected a lot of the original images that we used in this book, and you have that visual perspective to the Lost Rocker. So, like, what is that visual constant to the Lost Rocker? Because, I mean, you've worked with stars and you haven't. Is it a universal thing that's not different? It doesn't reveal itself that way, or how do you look at the visual side of the Lost Rocker?
Well, I don't think there's quite a, per se, a visual side. I think just in terms of dealing with moving pictures and sound, it's really, you know, you find these stories and you try to connect them, and it's you know, the juxtaposition of picture and sound and story. You just try to find a thread, and then as a whole, when they're all connected, it should take on a certain humanity. You know, these are people's lives that are intersecting, and they all had a certain course in their journey, but you try to make it one big journey, you know, a 100-minute journey that connects somehow, and you try to find that thread, and that's, you know, that's kind of how I try to, you know, when I look at the film. I mean, it's fascinating to go through archives, you know, and find all this stuff, and just figuring out how it's going to work, and a lot of stuff doesn't work. You know, you have to pick pieces of the stories. I know when most of these guys saw the film the first time, Jake, I think you said, it's like, that's like 10 minutes of my career. You know? And it's like, well, yeah, there's 8 of you, and it's got to be like a 90 to 100-minute movie. You know? But you have to look at it as the story of the Lost Rockers. It's about all of your intersecting lives and how it bounces between you guys. And I kind of tried to warn them a little bit. So listen, it's 90 minutes, so it's going to be pieces of your career, you know. But after he had that reaction, it's like, yeah, I really like it, but it's like 5 minutes, you know. So I think that's part of, you know, that's part of the. Sorry. Oh yeah, make it like an 8-hour movie, right? Like OJ, Made in America, you know, Lost Rockers.
Awesome.
But it's that's kind of the magic that you try to weave together, and it takes a long time. You know, it's you know, the pleasure of doing a very independent film and having a very little bit of money to do it and taking a long time is you get to spend a long time to keep cooking it, you know, and then all of a sudden it cooks and it's done and it starts talking back to you and it feels good. You know, when you do a movie, you get hired to do a movie and they give you 12 weeks and you got to do it in 12 weeks and that's it. And it's like, yeah, a lot of times you feel like, well, it never really gets to where it needs to go. So, you know, I think this film really kind of cooked a nice way and it connects. So anyway, that's
awesome. Tony, you know, we're talking about this whole kind of culture of the rediscovery of these musicians and all that. And you and I have been traveling around. We're in Chicago and Milwaukee and got Boston next month. But we've been doing a bunch of stuff. And what are you noticing about this culture? It's like a record, like it's something about people who go to record stores, people who love finding music that isn't the usual stuff that's shoved down your throat. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but kind of.
Sure. Yeah. So we had an event in Chicago recently, and Robert Fleischman, who was an original member of Journey, he actually wrote a bunch of their hits. He wrote Wheel in the Sky, and he performed it for us in the store, and he was later in Vinnie Vincent Invasion, and sang on that album, but wasn't in the videos. And anyway, so we've done a few events, and we have some more to come. But what I see with these people, they want to know all the minutia, and they know a lot about it, and they know how these people tie together, and they know the producers, what studios, they know all about it. And the people, vinyl fans, vinyl's a growing thing again, and it's outselling everything years in a row now. And the thing is that people like the sound of something that isn't so manufactured, a little more realistic, and they want to know, why didn't this star make it? Why didn't that person make it? A lot of this is like business support system between under these people. Someone could have a hit record like Evie Sands, and the label won't put it out, or the label goes under. There's business reasons, like it's Gas Wild in the back there. He's seen with the top hat. That's Gas Wild. He's on the cover of the book. He's a member of Love Pirates. He helped form the Pretenders. He was in Lightning Raiders, a great band that was on Island Records, and the album never really came out for political reasons. They played at Reading Festival. They were set to be a really big rock band, and it just was crushed because of political and business reasons. It's not the art. It was a great band, great songs. If you hear the album, it's amazing. And all these people made amazing bodies of work, and when you start to listen to it, you're like, wow, it draws you in more. Other stuff, kind of hit songs, okay, a lot of them are very calculating, brainwashing, but I just think that some of these people more human side of their art, and it just comes out in their music. So that's what I find.
That's awesome. I want to talk to the artist for a little while now. Now, Jake, we've talked to you before about this stuff, so I don't think I'm putting words in your mouth, but I think you were like a little too like smart and cerebral and self-deprecating to really want to be a rock star. And you kind of like talked to us about that a little bit, but it's like, in 1967, everybody's talking about underground sounds, and they have long hair, and you're wearing a tie, and you're calling your record the above ground sounds of Jake Holmes. So, I kind of just wanted to ask you, like, and maybe you want to give an example of what you were thinking of at a certain moment, but, it's like this great cultural moment arises, and, like, you're not with it. You're not going for it. So, like, kind of...
I gotta say, I don't know if this is on. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that it's a thrill to be the star of Oblivion. I feel like I'm honored. What you're saying is not really true. I wouldn't have minded being a rock star. Luckily, I didn't. I look at it now and say, oh, for the grace of God, I didn't get there. I am a little bit self-deprecating.
For those of you who don't know, Jake wrote the songs Dazed and Confused. You might know the Led Zeppelin version. He wrote Dazed and Confused.
So that's on that album.
Let's hear it, come on. Dazed and Confused, pretty epic tune.
Well, I did better than Stairway to Heaven, that's what I'll tell
Yes,
you.
he did. Yes, he did.
He wrote two versions of it, too. He wrote another version for us.
Did you
for
win
our
a
partner.
lawsuit?
He settled out of court. Yeah.
But
I don't know, I forgot
For
what
an
you
undisclosed amount.
I was just kind of talking about like that, like you don't like you didn't want to be. I don't know who the person was, but like you didn't really want to be Jim Morrison or something like that.
No, I didn't want to be Jim Morrison.
Yeah, but there's probably like there was like because your thing is very kind of ethereal. I guess is that the right word?
Well, I guess really, my background was German leader, and I was just listening to this book, which is this weird book about some strange musician who's listening to the Mahler Kinder Totenlieder, which, if you don't know, is the songs of death of children. It's a song cycle about 5 children that died. That's sort of, I was going to start my own German leader network, but I couldn't raise the money. But I guess I was more of a theatrical writer, really. I wrote for character and I wrote for story. And the business that I was in the early days, we had a lot of folk rock and I came up in the folk world, so there was a lot of kind of good lyrics and a lot of good things. But slowly, as the business began to get more and more popping, the lyrics were less and less important. And I'm basically more of a lyricist than I am a musician, even though I'm a musician. But lyrics have always been my thing, poetry and things like that. So for me, it was, yeah, I thought there was a moment when I was on the Johnny Carson show and doing all this stuff, and I was in California. I was the headliner, and I was opening for, oh God, there was a duo, and I can't remember their names. There was One Took Over the Line. Yeah, and I was the headliner, and they were going for me. So and they had the hit, and I didn't have a big hit. I had a moderate hit. But, so that was sort of, and it was the worst time of my life. I can tell you that this period of time that I was really successful and really doing well in all kinds of areas. It was the worst time of my life. I was totally unhappy because, first of all, I'm complete neurotic and totally insecure, and at the same time, I think I'm the best thing since cream cheese. So you're what is that? I'm the asshole at the center of the universe. Isn't that the thing from Alcoholics Anonymous? And I was never, the other thing, I was never into drugs or alcohol. I mean, I drink, but I would have been dead if I had done cocaine. Because if you remember Len Bias, the basketball player, Boston Red Sox, he had a heart thing, and when he did cocaine, it triggered his heart, and I had the same thing. My heart stopped.
What's called free base.
Yeah. And that. So I somehow, my whole life, all these guys, all these people in my life, studio musicians and guys that I hung out with, all this stuff, they never gave me any coke. I never had. It was like the guy who walks out the manhole cover. I never had. So I consider myself extremely lucky. I mean that my life has turned out that I've actually gotten to this age. With pretty much in shape and not dying yet. So I don't know if that answered the question.
Gloria, from day one you were a singer, right? And you're like, you sang through childhood. You had a soul career. You wrote the songs for Motown. Then you made that Motown solo album where you're like the next Barry White. Right? Share My Love. It's deep. And you're like, everything you worked for, but then you made a decision based on love. So maybe, I don't know if you want to take us through the thinking or kind of talk about that, because that's so heavy. It's so deep, it's so beautiful, but it's also like your whole career, like this is what you wanted, but then you knew that there was this other force. So kind of talk about how life and timing and
I like Paul's is really powerful. Thank you for coming, and I must say, flying in, I have written this wonderful speech about Steve writing this book and Paul producing the film. They're partners, as you know. And then I'm 70 years old and forgot everything. So I said, well, I'll just have to speak from my heart. But during that time, I was always ahead of myself. And the industry was not comfortable if you were confident and making your decisions. And I was sort of like a gambler. I would take risks. I would wear hot pants to the sessions, thinking that would make the musicians play better. That was just in my head. I don't know why, but what happened was, I'm going to answer that, but it frightened me. The other day I was at Starbucks in Los Angeles, and a film producer walks up to me. He says, I'd rather have Jay-Z as president than Kanye West. And I was like, I can't believe this man said that to me. So I was always ahead of my time. I remember when I told the industry in 1980 that rap music was going to be the next biggest thing. They got mad at me. So that was one of the reasons that I have always made decisions to follow my heart. And I followed my heart when I fell in love with Mark Bolton. We were only friends, but he understood my passion for the industry, but he also understood that I would never be exposed the way he was able to expose me throughout the world. And that's really what happened. The industry at that time, there could only be one Aretha, one Diana, one Gladys, and that's just the way it was. And you did not have the freedom that the young people have now. And I think this is the hurt that caused Michael's early death. No freedom. And this is what the Lost Rockers has given to me. It has given me the peace in my heart that I was a creative person, and that's why we are here. We were creative people, and still creative.
Yeah.
But we are all still very blessed. So these are gifts. And I think that was the hardest thing for me to understand, that I had this gift. And that's where Mark gave me the assurance. And I just thank you all every day, and I just think, Tony, you know, I could just preach, you know, but that is the reason I chose to leave my career and follow my heart.
So those moments, like Jake, when you were really unhappy and, you know, at the top of form and walking away from that, and you walking away from your songwriting career, it's very liberating, right?
Yes.
Those were liberating moments. You were like saving yourself.
Well, it's liberating, but it's also, you know, I think that people make two choices. You know, two people strive on, go on and try to, you know, get success. And then other people, what I loved most was writing. I thought that was the most fun. The performing thing, my stomach was always sick. You know, I felt sick to my stomach, and I'd get up, and you know, and it was. I mean, once I did it, it was fun, and I loved that drive to want to be. I still do love to talk. Like, look at me, I'm talking in front of you. So I love that, but I don't love what comes with it. I don't love all the stuff that comes with it. First, I didn't mind the traveling, that was cool, but all the other stuff, all that crap. I mean, we did a concert somewhere, I remember this, and I was at the bottom of the bill, and nobody was getting paid. So we all went back, all the bands went back to the box office. Well, I ended up with a basket full of coins. That was my pay, because everybody else got big bills. They managed to get all the big money. But we, the band on the bottom of the thing, had to end up with quarters and nickels and dimes. And so I had to like carry this huge thing around with me. So it's like this whole hierarchy thing, and you know, the contest nowadays with all these contests and people winning, being the best songwriter. The thing for me was the writing. I mean, I thought that was what the game was. I didn't understand that you were trying to be, you know, you were more flamboyant and crazy and all that stuff. I thought if you wrote a really good song with a really good lyric and told a really good story, that the mouse would, you built a better mousetrap, that somebody would come and, well, that didn't, turned out that wasn't what it was about. And I would read the Village Voice, and I would think, what are they talking about? You know, they would talk about this guy wasn't enough of this, or he wasn't enough of that, and he didn't have this and that. I was like, what in the hell are they? I didn't understand the Village Voice, and that was my problem. And you know, I'm glad I had it, because it ended up being I don't know what everybody does out here, but to me, the most satisfying thing is whatever you do that you love. That's what keeps you alive. It's not what people, you know, say, oh, that's great. That's nice for like 10 minutes, but the part of it that's so great is being able to sit in your room and come up with something really cool, or I don't know, build a boat, or whatever it is that you want to do. You know, that's it for me.
I think it takes courage to do that when the people around you are not supporting you too. Then you have to overcome
You pull back. Yeah.
it. It makes you want to quit.
Yeah.
I dabble creatively, and I find even my closest friends are, doing another plan, they don't care.
Yeah,
And so you have to kind of forge on.
yeah.
It's interesting to see someone, folks of your stature and experience.
And these people have a very rigid self-discipline, and nobody's pushing them to do it but themselves, and they're the hardest critic on themselves. And you just sit in there alone in a room trying to create something, and you just don't know if you did it or not.
It's sort of following
Yeah.
your heart,
Yeah.
and not selling out to
just
the industry.
Throwing your guts out there, and there it is. And that's very personal songs sometimes from these people, and they're not, like, okay, like I was talking about Robert Fleischman, he wrote Wheel in the Sky, but Steve Perry was the famous singer of Journey and sang the hit recording Wheel in the Sky, but there's a lyric, I haven't been home in a year or more, and Robert Fleischman wrote that because he lived it, because he was on tour opening for Van Halen as a solo artist who didn't make it. He wrote that lyric and then he got kicked out of Journey. And Steve Perry went on to sing it, but the heart of the lyric, came from that guy who lived it, not pretending. But some people can sing the blues, if you're not feeling it, it sounds like crap. You put your heart in it, it's like people can relate. So if someone's black, white, or some whatever, they put their heart in it, people can relate to kind of music.
Well, that's the difference between someone who works with formulas versus an authentic artist.
Sure,
I think that's where
absolutely.
you guys are hitting.
Yeah, that's well put.
That's kind of what we're hitting on here. That kind of brings me into I wanted to talk to both these people about fame a little bit, but so Jake, you were this solo artist, and you're in magazines, and there's pictures of Jake Holmes, and in the public way, you weren't incredibly successful, but then you become a jingle writer, and it's totally anonymous, and you're very successful. So I think you're probably a good person to speak about the value of fame. And maybe you want to talk about that moment where you gave up on this pursuit of being a recording artist or rock star or whatever the word is.
I don't think I ever gave up. I just it just sort of went away. I mean, so then you walk to somewhere other place.
That moment where you decided I'm gonna write jingles like that.
Yeah, well, I didn't decide. I was really good at it, and somehow I got it. Carly Simon and I actually started with an anti-drug commercial, and we were working together. And she went off, and I went up to Nashville to do something. But meanwhile, that's how it started. And then I just kept writing, and they just kept coming. So I just kept doing it. So that happened.
So, but there's so much emphasis on you go on, like you said, you're on Johnny Carson or whatever you said. It's and people are wow, you're famous. You were on the Johnny Carson show. But what is the real value of this? Because everybody pursues it. And they're all going for this thing, and there's just nothing there a lot of the time. And
I think there is something there. I mean, I think people like Tom Hanks, I use an example, who seems to have done really well with fame, and Harry, in his way, because
Harry Belafonte.
yeah, because he chose to be an activist at the same time as being a performer, and because of that, his fame has lingered in a way, and the black community. People talked to Prince, I think, a week or 2 weeks before he died, and Prince was trying to find his way. And there's a couple of artists. I'm trying to think. One is a rap artist recently, and I can't remember who it is. I was talking to him just recently about who is trying to give back more now to his community, and he's come to Harry to find out how to do that. And he does. And Harry does that a lot with a lot of people. And that kind of fame is that. I mean, that's real fame to me. And the fame that I have in my world is the respect of my peers and the people who know what I do and how well I do it. And that fame is what sustains me. That other kind you're talking about is it's like what's her name, Hilton, and the people
Paris
who are
Hilton,
famous
sure.
for whatever they're famous.
Yeah.
They're just famous for being famous. And that that goes down to maybe finally where somebody's famous because they actually delivered something that's worthwhile. So I would think that it's that other kind of fame is not very much fun. And I think I was experiencing that kind of fame. I was not famous for anything that I had done that was really good. It was just that I had a song that happened to be successful. So I didn't feel that I deserved it. And I didn't. I really didn't deserve it. Now I do. So if you guys want to go out and like that, I could live with it now. But that's the point is that I think there are two kinds of fame, or degrees of fame. Some people have none, and then other people have they have something that's really good, and then there are a lot of people that I think like an actor like a Tom Hanks or what's her name, Sarah. I can't think of her name anyway. She's just she's a great actress. But there's a lot of great actors and actors, and those people, they're all insecure and crazy. But they do, I think they do have a kind of fame that they can actually lean on. They can lean back and say, okay, I deserve this. So that's kind of what I would think.
But you've also he was in a band for a period with Joan Rivers, who couldn't really carry a tune in a bucket. He was trying to make something out of that, and they did get in a movie, and it's like a coffee house type scene, folk music, and then Joan Rivers went on to be very famous, and it's a type of thing of people that are willing to do anything to get famous, to walk over anybody, to whatever to get the fame, and that's another personality trait. Like Carrie said, you don't possess that personality trait. You're not gonna oh, look out, here comes Jake Holmes, get out of my way. It's like somebody like Joan Rivers is just all about it. And that's consumes their whole life to some degree.
But she had, you're right, but she
did have talent.
She was one of those in between because she had a writer's talent. She was a great writer, and she knew comedy, and she was a great comedy person. But at the same time, she had that other side. She had the other side, which was this fame for fame's sake. So she was an in-betweener. I'd call her a tweener.
Okay.
But she called me a wound with a necktie. Which I thought
nice.
I don't know what it
it's
meant.
A compliment.
But, right.
Wow. Thank you. Gloria, I kind of wanted to ask you a similar question about the value of fame, and I don't want to get too heavy, but it's like, you were jet-setting around the world with Mark Bolan, and then a few years after that, it's like the opposite, try to raise Roland. So you kind of understand this whole thing of fame, and
No, it's interesting.
It's really, yeah.
Steve, I am still the queen of Northern Soul.
Yeah, that's right.
In the UK. So I attend their parties, and I come down to breakfast, and they're like, will she speak to us? And so I told Tony, I sit there and I'm like, and they come, they say, there she is. So I don't know how to, I don't know what to do, so I just sit there.
Yeah, I've been with Gloria in London at T-Rex events, and wow,
it's very strange.
It's heavy.
And then I come back home to Los Angeles, and it's like, oh yeah, that's the lady that walks her dogs and makes sure she has her bag. Don't bring your dog in my yard. And I want to say, I'm Gloria Jones, the queen of Northern Soul. But I would just like to say, I never had a chance to think of being a star because my mother, she was a housekeeper. My father was a minister. So all they thought about was working to make sure they could pay for my piano lessons. And then he had a congregation of very mean people. So if they got mad at us, that next Sunday we had no food on the table. So my brother and I, we were like, what are we doing? So I had to use the industry as a job opportunity. Now I'm enjoying more of the champagne since being in the Lost Rockers. And my taxi driver was making sure I got here, So I'm having fun now, like you said, and that's all I can tell you. We're just blessed.
I want to put, there is one thing that is really interesting to me about fame. I live in Beacon, and Beacon is the town where Pete Seeger moved to in 1942. And we've been there for 10 years. And so I had Pete for the last, I guess, 8 years of his life. And he would walk around town. People would, hi Pete or whatever. And sometimes you'd go down to the park and he'd be picking up papers in the park. He'd be doing stuff. Or he'd be playing at some strawberry festival with 3 people and there'd be a kid and her mother be there and he's playing. He had a way of just ignoring fame. He was the most honest, I never saw a man who he had an ego, I guess, but he just said, that's not for me. Fame is not for me. I'm just a guy, and he taught in the schools, he had choirs, and he had all this kind of folky, like kumbaya stuff, but at the same time, it was real. It was the most real. He was the biggest star I ever met who was totally real, and that's another kind of thing, which I've never seen in anybody else. He's the only man I ever saw that.
Well, I'm looking around the room at a lot of my friends here, and I don't know how much more intellectual stuff they could handle. But
Sorry.
I'm going to kind of throw out one final question and let everybody answer it. However, chime in. Don't worry about it. But to me, this kind of makes perfect sense, because if you know your art history, like, everybody will tell you about the great artists who don't get discovered till later in life. And that's the reality of it. And rock and roll is the great late 20th century art form. So this just kind of stands to reason to me. And this is kind of part of the journey. Like, you either, you get your fame at 18, or like you go to your deathbed knowing that you helped change things. And I don't know, just, am I right? Do you guys want to talk about that?
I don't know what to say about that. I think I'm too intellectual. I gotta cool down. I don't think anybody's gonna remember me after I'm dead. I don't think that's. I mean, maybe what I would love to be remembered for is one poem, or one haiku, or just actually. I am in a book, which is famous Zen sayings. And my saying was, it's the nothing that makes us something, it's what we miss that hits the mark. And that was from a 7-Up commercial. And they put it in this book, so. That's right, that was my song.
That was his song, 7-Up the Uncle. An American icon, the songs he'd written. Dazed and confused, be all you can be in the army. I'm a pepper, you're a pepper. I mean, come on, that covers a lot right there. And you can sing about Gillette, and you make you feel about it. Wow, it is the best I can be. I'm convinced. I'm gonna see the softer side of Sears. I feel it.
I was in a really bad mood one day, and I'm walking, and I come into this coffee shop, and I'm getting my coffee, and I hear me singing "Be All You Can Be," and I went, "Okay, all right, that's good. I can do that."
And he's not exactly a warmonger, but he was writing a song for the Army Reserve. So this, he's working. He's working.
That was Oprah, when I was on Oprah, and she said to me, and it was awful. It was the worst feeling in my life. And she turned to me, she said, "How could you write that song?" And I said, sending all those poor guys to their death, I said, oh.
Aren't you hungry for Burger King now? That's his song. That's his song, yeah. He's one of the premier jingle writers of the 70s, absolutely.
All right.
I also wrote Mr. Bubba Bubba Bubble in the Tub of Bubba Bubbles. And that one, that big hit.
I slept on that one, I think.
How did you answer Oprah's question?
What?
How did you answer Oprah's indictment?
I think I just went, oh. I don't even remember. I was so debilitated by that. Then I thought that whole show had been a horror show, and I snuck out and did all this stuff. And then I looked at it. When I saw it later, I said, oh. wasn't that bad. I guess it wasn't as bad as I thought, but that's another thing about performing, you know. I think the people who have the least amount of knowledge about how good a show went is the actual performer themselves. They don't know, so, you know, it's
That's a very good point.
I would just like to add that information is very, very important. And this is why we are here. The day you stop learning is the day that you die.
Yeah. Books.
So that's
Reading.
why books, you know, it's very important.
Read a book.
Yes. But
Seriously.
information, you know.
Hi, I have a question for Gloria. Just reading about the book. First of all, I really respect your decision to go with Mark and go international and see the world and love and everything in the future. But how did you feel when Barry Gordy pointed you out as the songwriter? And did you record in Studio A? And also, how do you pronounce COG? That group.
The
Kojics.
Kojics.
The Kojics.
Yeah,
Church of God in Christ Singers.
Yes.
That's her first band. It's her, Billy Preston,
Edna
Andre
Wright.
Crouch, Edna Wright,
Blinky Williams.
Blinky Williams. This is a pretty good first band.
Frankie Carl.
Frankie Carl.
What happened, excuse me, I was surprised when Mr. Gordy said, Brenda Holloway said, Mr. Gordy, this is Gloria Jones, the singer. And he says, no, this is Gloria Jones, the songwriter. So at first I was like, but I haven't written anything. But then I did, because I wrote Tainted Love. So
Tainted Love. Come on. Everybody knows that song in the whole world. Come on.
So, this is when your ego comes in. I said, well, if I write, then I can collect another check. So I used my mother's maiden name. So in Detroit, they would call me Laverne, Laverne, and I was like, what are you calling? And that's, oh, that's me. So then I would turn around, and I was Laverne in Detroit as a songwriter, and Gloria Jones on the West Coast, the singer. Because you could not be a songwriter and a singer when I was coming here.
And you're a producer, too.
Yes, they would not allow, I couldn't even have a studio in the house. It was forbidden. I was told I must never have a studio in the house. I could never write songs. I had to make a decision. See, you're talking about 63, 64. So there were still a lot of rules from the old race record concepts, but I never go into that time because I'm more of a love child, you see.
You know, Gloria kind of plays it down, but you know, she wrote 2468 for Jackson 5 and
If I were your woman last night.
Yeah, last night. My Mistake, Marvin Gaye, Tammy Terrell. Like crazy stuff, crazy stuff.
She
And
sang
sang on
on-
like, like what? You sang on the first Neil Young album? You sang on like what?
Dixie
Like,
Chicken,
Dixie Chicken, come on.
Sweet Home Alabama.
Yeah, Skinner.
Yeah, she's on all of that, you know?
I was wondering if you could direct, if I may, maybe kind enough, a creative question
Thank you.
to Gloria and to Jake, because I play guitar and I've struggled with doing something original. Writing is, I think, the genius behind any song. That you reminded me of David Bowie would actually, I've seen in interviews comment he's always a writer first. And I was wondering, where would you get your ideas in your creative process? Is it something that you would just be walking down the street and an idea would pop in your head, or is it like, hey, I'm gonna write a song today?
Well, here I go again,
So
Steve.
what is the Well, actually learned to play as years go by on guitar, and I read an account on Wikipedia how the Rolling Stones were put into a kitchen. I forgot who the producer was, and he ordered them.
Andrew
I want
Lee
a
Golden.
song. Yeah, I want a song.
She sang on Salt of the Earth.
Wow. So,
She sang on a lot of
so
songs.
I'm just
Not
thinking
great.
that if this is a golden opportunity to get some geniuses to come.
Well,
and
let me tell you.
share.
Now, I was doing all of that writing, And I was in love, once again love, I was in love with the arranger. He and I were both young, and we married like one week ahead of each other. I never met him, but when he walked in, I said, that's the guy I should have married. Anyway, he was an arranger, and I wrote all of those songs because I was in love with him. And I thought he was in love with me. Until 2 weeks ago, I was reading a little information on the iTunes, and all of that. And this guy never mentioned any of the songs. I said, this guy never liked me. But thank you for letting me write about you. So what I'm saying to you is that when you are writing, it's, once again, a gift. And you have to trust and believe in yourself. Because you're going to be told that's not a hit record. And it ends up being one of your largest records. Gladys Knight said, If I Were Your Woman was the worst song she had ever recorded in her life. I was so hurt. And she said this on an interview, and they were playing it on TWA. That's how long ago that was. And she said, I couldn't stand that song. And I'm listening, I'm up on the airplane, and I'm like, I can't wait to get off this plane. But I didn't do that, I really didn't. But Jake knows, you have to have faith, and you have to really trust. You have to trust yourself.
Great.
Well, I would take that one step to the left. To the left. I wish I could have. And that is that one of the ways you have to fight for that faith is you're facing an empty page, or you're facing writer's block, or you're facing nothing. And what you have to do is when you sit down with a pen or a paper or whatever, you have to have the ability to say, okay, I know how I'm feeling. I know there's nothing here. I haven't got any idea. I don't know what I'm going to do. And you just start. And you just start and do something, and you just let yourself go. And quite often what I would do is just write crap. And sometimes I would just write stuff in books and just write crap in books. And then maybe about a week later I go back and look, and I'll say, oh, I like that little thing right there. And then once that sort of trigger goes off, then you're sort of up and running. But again, you'll hit a wall, and then you get that feeling again, and you go, oh, and when I first started as a young writer, that thing just was like 40 feet high. And as I got more and more writing success, the wall went down. But it's still about here. I mean, I still, every time I face, I've got 2 jobs to do that I have to do, and I'm going, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. What is this, So it's what she's saying is she's behind what I'm saying. Behind that is the confidence in yourself, that you have to have that.
You guys race,
Hold on.
does the melody come also, or is that you guys write the words, the lyrics, and then the melody simultaneous?
It's sometimes one, sometimes the other. I think you're on a cliff and you're grasping for a hold of some sort of, and sometimes you're grasping in a musical hold, sometimes you're grasping in a lick. I mean, with Dazed and Confused for me, it was that the descending 6/8 thing, and then those are the kind of things that you just don't know what it'll be. It might be your kid says something to you, or something triggers. You hope that you're going to get some kind of a trigger from something.
I was telling Tony yesterday that I studied classical music, and one of my favorite composers was Bach. So one day, Pamela Sawyer and I were writing, and I decided to write in thirds. Because Bach, his writing, most of those things are in thirds. And I wrote the melody of If I Were Your Woman in thirds. And so the orchestrators at Motown, they said, we're just tired of her. She's always doing these things. We want baby, baby, where did our love go, And she's writing in thirds, But this is what it's all about. You have to have the confidence, and you have to complete your thoughts.
And if you're starting out, don't write to get anywhere. Just write for yourself. Just write for enjoyment.
So I'm looking at all my friends here, and we got to cut this off. You know, I'm looking at people like milling around the room. I'm like, these are my buddies. It's like, one more question from the back of the room. The lady with the black hair. Yeah.
Is the movie available to be seen anywhere? When can we see it? What's happening?
The movie is actually locked. It's just going through some fundraising right now to finish it. So creatively, the movie's locked. It's done. We just got a little more money, and we just finished a lot of our legal. So now it's really, you know, adding up what we got to pay for in licensing and finding that last bit of money, and that's the process, you know. It just takes, some movies take a little longer than others. But yeah, it's coming.
Let us know how
Awesome.
we can help.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Hold it. Hold it.
Wait, the thing I want to know is that the part that I thought might have been the most difficult for you was getting the rights to all these things that we had done. That wasn't a problem for you?
No, it's you know, the process is moving forward. You know, we've narrowed down what you know, we're using fair use on some stuff, you know, not so much on the music, but it's you know, we got through that, and now we just have to, you know, cut our deals and get a bottom number.
Great.